Hello, 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 guys. This is Christina Barr from blacktnews.com, and I hope you guys all had a fantastic Thanksgiving, whether you got to spend it with a lot of family or just a couple of people and you did it as safe as possible. I hope you guys had a good time with your family, whether you were doing it together or digitally. Um, I wanted to talk about this because this just happened before Thanksgiving, like the night like coming into it. I believe the Supreme Court did a ruling on this case that a couple of churches, there's like two synagogues in the Brooklyn, it's like a Catholic diocese. I'm not Catholic, FYI. Came to get Roman Catholic. They came together and they did this lawsuit against Governor Andrew Cuomo, and saying basically you cannot discriminate against us in particular. You cannot say in these different zones or these different places that a liquor store or somewhere else may be able to open at 50%, but a church is capped at 10 people or 25 people, even though it might be a synagogue that holds 400 people, or it might be a Catholic church that holds 1,000 people, and you still have the cap at like just 10 people or so. So that's what they went to court for. And unfortunately, the decision only came down to 5-4. Now, of course, it is a majority, but this is the kind of case that, this is a First Amendment right thing, and it should be like 9-0 or at least, 6-3. And there were other cases that came, to the Supreme Court over the summer about religious liberty stuff, and they were 5-4, but they swayed the other way. This was when Ginsburg was still alive. And I want to say to the people that hated and doubted the president, he was right. He was absolutely 100% right to go ahead and say to nominate her and for the Republicans to push it through. And I remember there were some people pushing against it, even conservatives, so-called conservatives, 100% never Trumpers, that were saying that we need to wait. And they even wanted to bargain with Democrats saying, oh, we won't nominate her, anyone, until after the election if you promise not to pack the courts. And it's like, first of all, why would anyone agree to this? And second of all, even if the Democrats agreed to it, if you're a new incoming person, why on earth would they feel obligated to keep a promise that people made before they were even elected? Like Mitt Romney actually had a pretty good cover when people say, oh, you Republicans are hypocrites because what you did to Merrick Garland. And he's like, I wasn't even here. So I'm sure either way, he probably would have still did the same thing, but he had a valid argument of whatever beef you guys had before in like 2016. I wasn't here and I wasn't a part of it. So the conservatives that were writing articles and saying we need to make a deal with the Democrats, I just thought it was absolutely silly, absolutely ridiculous. And, I actually made the case, and I wrote this article on Black T News after, Amy was, that she was like announced, or even it might have even been before, but we knew pretty much it was going to be her. And I said, because of the debacle that we have with the mail-in ballots and how the election looks like it may go, I said, we actually need her to be confirmed because we don't want a decision that's going to come down to a tie. And this is me just saying, and I said that believing that the president was going to, be victorious on election night. But I still said, I believe that, especially since Hillary Clinton was saying Biden no concede, and he, no matter what, just keep fighting in the courts. And I'm like, what are they planning? But seeing how things are going with the mail-in ballots and other stuff, I'm like, it might need to be like a court decision. And so we didn't need it to come down to a tie. So I made the argument that I thought that the Democrats kind of created a problem with so many rules that fluctuated and laws that fluctuated during the election season because of the pandemic, they said, but obviously they had an excuse to do whatever they wanted for the election. But because they did that we would need her to be confirmed so we could have a full court. So I made that argument. And as the ball got rolling, and they were talking about packing the courts and all this other stuff. If she got confirmed, people were getting scared. The media was blasting Republicans for saying that if they confirmed her, then they're hypocrites, which I also did an article stating why, pushing back on a lot of these different criticisms. And I'm going to go through them really quick. First of all, people, they were saying it was hypocritical, but it wasn't really hypocritical because it was a different circumstance. Like the Biden rule, the McConnell rule was, basically it has to be if it's an election year, then they don't want to do it. But it wasn't just about being an election year. The presidency and the Senate are, if they're from two opposite parties, which obviously you're not going to get the result that you want if there's an opposite party like pushing up and opposing against you. So that's the case that we had. With the Merrick Garland situation, but it wasn't with the Amy Coney Barrett situation. They said some senators didn't keep their word. Because Lindsey Graham had said, before that he'd be willing, he would do the same thing, push it through. To his defense, I think a lot of things changed for him because I would say they radicalized Lindsey Graham hard, because he was like, these guys were my friends. We worked across the aisle. He just believed like if someone was qualified and had a good pedigree that he would vote for them. Now, I don't really believe for that. If you have people who aren't going to follow the Constitution and might inject their feelings or believe that it's a living, breathing document, and you don't want to be like an originalist or textualist or whatever, then you kind of want to invent laws and stuff or judge, create laws from the bench. I don't think people should confirm people like that. But Lindsey Graham was just like, if you have the background, I'm going to go ahead and say that you should get the job. And so they radicalized this man after the Brett Kavanaugh thing because he realized just how dirty and evil and the tricks that they would play for power. So then the rules kind of changed for him, which I can't really blame him because he realized they played by a different set of rules. And so he went ahead and he pushed it through and he did a good job. And so that's kind of his word on the matter. They said it would set a dangerous precedent. That's not true because it happened 29 times in our country. You can go back and read this article on blacktnews.com. They said that if Republicans, push the nominee through, they'll pack the courts. That one reason why the Georgia election is so important. Please go, if you're in Georgia, vote Republican. If you're close by or you have the opportunity, please help them one way or another. But who knows if they will actually try because there are some Democrats like Joe Manchin, they're saying they wouldn't do something like that. But I would just try to make sure that we maintain the majority. I wouldn't put our country's stake on their hands. Republicans said that people were saying Republicans should wait till the election was over. And obviously I'm glad that they didn't do that, but Trump at the end of the day, even if after the results and Trump still decided to announce her on November the 4th and push her through, which people would be livid about, just absolutely bonkers. And I don't actually know if the Republicans would be willing to do that or not. I don't know. But the point of the matter is he's still president until whoever is sworn in January. So he has the constitutional authority to do the work of the president until his term is over one way or another. So he had the constitutional authority to do what he did. And I'm glad that he had the guts to go ahead and do it. Yeah, obviously it was enough time to vet because Trump had a list before. So people were saying it wasn't enough time to vet. That was silly. They, went through and had their hearing and she was great. And there were Republicans who were on the fence about the whole thing. And then they actually saw her perform during the her hearing, and they thought she was really impressive. So, and that was what everyone thought about it. So she went ahead and she was confirmed. And this is the first ruling that had any really special significance with her on it. And like I said, it was 5-4, and that was just absolutely too close for my taste. Gorsuch and Roberts seem to go at it a little bit with some of the things they were saying. I'm gonna go ahead and play that. Not play it. Read a little bit of what Gorsuch said. He said, "It is past time, to make plain that, while the pandemic poses many grave challenges, there is no word in which the Constitution tolerates color-coded executive edicts that reopen liquor stores and bike shops, but shutter churches, synagogues, and mosques." So, it's so, oh gosh, this goes blank every time I didn't know that. So there are some people saying that, like Seth MacFarlane and other people are saying that, that people going to church are going to kill people, and this was a wrong ruling, and they can't look past for public health, and so on. And the liberal judges who dissented kind of made the point that I'm going to go ahead and rule with the government of New York, because they said that they believed people were saving lives. And I don't really think it's that simple. And I'm going to play this clip for you guys, because they know that all of their things that they are recommending and saying, that they don't 100% know that the science is behind. And they're trying. Some people are trying their best. I'll give them that. But it's anyone who doesn't understand that everyone has the right to kind of weigh the risks and rewards of everything. But it's just more complicated than us being healthy. But we also have to think of our rights and what could happen down the line. And also, the president said we have to consider, we don't want the cure to be worse than the actual disease. And we know people have committed suicide. We know people, and there was an article that came out about people left alone in nursing homes to that left away in nursing homes to die, and people can't see their loved ones. There's people who couldn't have elective surgeries. I know someone who had surgery and they kicked them out. Basically, they did the surgery and kicked them out within like 4 hours. I know a friend of mine was waiting a long time, like basically the entire summer, to know if a mass inside of him was cancerous. A friend of mine, their father had needed batteries or an update for their like pacemaker. And so there was just a lot of things going on that people wasn't getting the kind of care that they need. And there's family members that are sick in the hospital who would be doing better if they could be with their family beyond just a call. So I think I understand a lot of the measures, but some of them are cruel, downright cruel. But I'm going to play this. This is something that the governor of New York said. Now, people are saying, oh, they're doing all these things to save lives, but listen to what he says.
Rabbi, I'll ask, let me make a comment and let Dr. Zuker. I don't disagree with you. And look, I'm 100% frank and candid. This is not a highly nuanced, sophisticated response. This is a fear-driven response. This is not a policy being written by a scalpel. This is a policy being cut by a hatchet. It's just a very blunt. I didn't propose this, it was proposed by the mayor in the city. I'm trying to sharpen it and make it better, but it's out of fear. People see the numbers going up. Close everything. It's not the best way to do it, but it is a fear-driven response. The virus scares people. Hopefully, we get the numbers down in the zip codes, the anxiety comes down, and then we can have a smarter, more tailored approach. Your point is right. Why close every school? Why don't you test the schools and close the ones that have a problem? I know, but first, I don't know that we have the resources to do that now, but I can tell you honestly, the fear is too high to do anything other than let's do everything we can to get the infection rate down now. Close the doors, close the windows. That's where we are. Commissioner, do you want to add something?
I think that's exactly the point.
Yeah. So we see that, in which they acknowledge that some of the things that they're doing is to is a reaction out of fear, and we know that not everything was done wisely. And he, as he said, the mayor made some decisions. He said he was trying to fine tune them. But we do know the government's picked a lot of winners and losers. Like Kumo had an interview one day, and they were asking about people who wanted to go to work, and they're like, well, he got testy with a reporter, and he's like, well, you're an essential worker. They can get a job as essential worker, and they won't kill anyone. I'm like, well, there is no scientific basis in that. Saying that just because you're an essential person that you won't kill anyone. And there were earlier studies in New York that was like that people who were staying at home were the ones infecting each other, rather than the people who are going out to work every day. I mean, think about at the beginning when they closed like all the most of the subways, and so everyone was like packed into the particular ones when they went out to go to work. And another thing with like airplanes, they're sending people out in airplanes, and they're like, packed. A lot of them go and they're packed. Maybe that's not the case that everyone's experienced, but like when my family hop on a plane, there's a lot of people in there. So yeah, a lot of the responses have been fear driven, which I guess you can't totally blame them for, but at the same time, we know that there's also been a lot of hypocrisy as well. For example, here's a clip of people celebrating after Joe Biden was announced by the media as the president-elect. Yeah. And so, and people know that you can see we've had all these protests and stuff in Michigan. Our governor was really upset when people started protesting against the lockdowns, which I keep seeing people say, if we could just have 6 weeks of serious lockdowns. I'm like, what world have you been living in? Because people, not everyone was doing everything, but we had, I think, a pretty high compliance with masks and everything, even before they like really started to force it. And there's a lot of people who I know they're not anti-mask, but they're anti harsh government authority. And so anyway, I mean, people were social distancing, a lot of, sending people off to get their groceries if they felt vulnerable and all this other stuff. So, I mean, in America where we have liberty and freedom, I don't know how much strict you can get, especially with the virus already out there. So intense. I mean, they're going to need, people to kind of, I guess, survive it. And then people go and get their vaccine, who want to get the vaccine to go on and trying to build up some kind of herd immunity so we can kind of go on with the rest of our lives. But just what kind of precedent are we setting if we just continue to let measures get more harsh on the people? But anyway, back to Whitmer. So the people, they were pretty compliant. There's grumbles here and there, but I know some pretty radical Republicans. Okay. So it was pretty compliant at first, grumbles here and there. But when the policy started to get really inconsistent and weird, that's when people were like, this, enough is enough. And like you could be in a big box store, for an example. Oh gosh. Give me one. I had that something playing in my ear. First, it was an ad. It was for the Daily Wire. When they always have stuff that pops up in their ads, and they just start automatically playing on their page. But so the inconsistent thing that they had was with you could be in a big box store and they'd say, well, seeds are not essential, so you can't go buy seeds, even though you're already in Walmart and there's like a section. And it's like, but they would section it off. So some people just kind of didn't care and would go in like defiance and go get their stuff. And I'm not aware of anyone that I saw like in my social media circle where a store stopped you if you went over to buy flowers for yourself. But it was really odd. It made people raise their eyebrows. And so another thing was like, you could be in a boat, but it had to be like a canoe. You couldn't be in a boat if it like had a motor. And so that people were like, why does it matter if I'm alone in the water and my boat has a motor in it? So that was something that people were like, okay, I understand some of these things, but some of the rules seem really silly. And so like that by then there was like kind of enough was enough. And so they had the big protest where it was like they had all these cars that were at the Capitol. And so there were some people who got out. It was not even a large margin compared to all the cars that were there. It was too much traffic for me to go out. I'm like, on one hand, I'm like, it'd be cool to see this. On the other hand, I'm like, I really hate traffic, and I can't see myself wanting to be there that bad. But congratulations to all the patriots that were there doing that. But she was so upset about that, and so it triggered other kind of protests across the country. And so she spoke out against that, and she was like, "You people are spreading the virus." And she was even at a press conference one day, like, "Well, how do you know?" And she's just like, guys, just think about it. And she's like, I don't have proof. And so people kind of ragged on her a bit about that. But as soon as like the Black Lives Matter stuff, she was out there protesting herself. And so when people questioned her about it, she's like, well, my daughters was begging me to go, and she wanted to protest. And so we went ahead and we did it. And so, and she wasn't always, she had a mask on most of the time, I think, but she wasn't social distancing. And obviously, how can you criticize? You can be mad at people for pushing back on your lock. She's human. She can be upset about people pushing back against her orders and stuff like that. But to get upset over one kind of protest and then go participate in another, that's crazy. And so when people see this kind of hypocrisy from people like her, or people like CNN's Chris Cuomo, who was like, oh, I'm in quarantine, but left his house to go check on another property that was being built and got upset when like a person riding a bike confronted them. And you had over Thanksgiving, you had officials saying, don't go anywhere, try to avoid travel. And then they went ahead themselves. And Lori Lightfoot, like, I need a haircut, so I got a haircut when other people couldn't get a haircut. And Whitmer's like husband, and the boating incident was pretty like famous, made mainstream news. And she was like, oh, it's just my joke. My husband was joking when he said, can you put my boat in the water first? But they had reached out to a state senator when he had wrote about it on Facebook, and they're like, can you take this down? This is just a rumor. And so he took it down, and then he found out that it was pretty much real. And so he's like, well, now I look like I'm complicit in your cover up. And so saying, oh, it was just a joke, versus like 10 minutes ago when you were like, oh no, this is a rumor, can you please take this down? You weren't really honest about it. So people see this hypocrisy. And so when you have a lawsuit like this, is saying, look, to exercise and practice our religion is a First Amendment right. It's protected. A right to peaceably assemble is protected, and to gather and to worship together. There's nothing more fundamental and beautiful in America than this. And to say that we have to have a cap on 1,000 seat place and only allow like 10 or 25 people when other places can do 50% capacity, it's just not. It's not cool. It's just insane. And it is upsetting that the margin was only 5-4, and that the other justices swayed, dissented from this. It's really something that you would like to think that everybody could jump on board with, and to think that, that we're so close. If Amy wasn't on there, I guess we'd have, it would be a tie. And so I think it's unfortunate. Roberts is like a swing vote, but he seems like he's swinging the other way more often than not. And I think at this point, I think we're going to start getting to a point where if he swings the conservative way, people will be kind of more surprised, like, oh, thank God. So I'd be really leery of him, and concerned when stuff pops up. But I'm glad that Amy is there. I'm glad that religious liberty was protected in this instance. I'm glad that we had a president that was willing to do the right thing and push someone who they believe is going to follow the law. Now, people who are like, wait, I'm going to just give a fair warning to some people waiting about the election and for waiting for like Clarence Thomas and Kavanaugh to get their like revenge on like Kamala and Biden. If I'm going to just tell you, if Trump doesn't have a good case, and I know someone will be like, he has a great case. If he doesn't make a great case, they're not going to just sway his way because because they are people who believe in following the law. And I think probably the thing that, I don't know, the route that seems the most plausible or possible is trying to audit the ballots questioning, because there's so much change with the signature verification and other stuff like that. And the amount of like rejected ballots in the past is a big discrepancy from, I guess, this current election. So that would be my guess. That's some kind of the most plausible route, but they changed so many laws and other things. I don't know how much is just shady as opposed to illegal, but or didn't follow the Constitution or whatever. But Trump is going to have to make his case, and it's going to have to be a good case. And if it is a good case, I believe they'll sway that way. But he's got to make a good case. And if you just think that they're going to get personal about it and just like, revenge is a dish best served cold kind of situation, I wouldn't hold my breath. It really is on the Trump administration to really make the case, and we will see what happens on that front. But people who adhere to the Constitution, I think there's going to be some cases where maybe you don't like things as much as they do, but they're just going to call balls and strikes as they see them. And I just want at the end of the day, we should all want our liberty to be protected. And it's sad, but not surprising that there's so many people coming against this decision that they made, and are just like grandma killers and all this other stuff. The same people who were like so for Black Lives Matter. And I've seen people say, why do you guys keep bringing up Black Lives Matter? It's totally different, because they were out here killing us in the streets and all this other stuff. And it's like, first of all, that is a really hyper hysterical opinion. And and it still doesn't matter. Does the virus care? I mean, and you could say, well, it's outside, but you have still all these people gathered together for like unnecessary risk. And you might say, well, I think the risk is worth it. Okay, people who want to go to church and worship believe, or people who want to go to the grocery store, or people, who want to just live their life feel that it's worth it. So if you're going to make that case for that, then you need to accept that other people want to weigh the options and take that risk as well. And when there was like a lot of maybe 1,200 medical professionals signed on, and CNN and other people did an article about it saying that don't use COVID as excuse for people not to protest. That was really unfortunate, especially since there were, people were so upset about the lockdown protests, and they're just demonizing one thing that they don't like and uplifting something that they do. And it's unfortunate that that coronavirus became so political. And Trump didn't make it political. A lot of it was the media. And even when like the protests erupted into riots, you'd have CNN just standing and in front of your television, and there's like fire behind them, and the screen at the bottom will just say fiery but mostly peaceful protest. That is a true story. There are all kinds of memes and jokes about it, but they kept saying these are peaceful protests, and they wouldn't even address that there was kind of chaos going on until Don Lemon was like, it's in the poll, it's showing up the polls, and was kind of crying about it. So yeah, so it obviously people pick and choose when they feel that this virus is relevant to talk about. And that's not what the people who say that they're the party of science, that's not a great thing to do. Not a great thing to do. Really quickly, I do want to talk about the comments that the Pope made. He wrote an op-ed. Well, somebody wrote an op-ed and said the Pope did it, I guess. I'm going to assume he doesn't write his own op-eds. But it was published right after the decision came down. And he was he was criticizing the people who would speak out against the government doing their best to limit, our freedoms, I suppose, in order to keep us safe and with the lockdowns and so on. But he spoke about how let me read it. With some exceptions, governments have made great efforts to put the well-being of their people first, acting decisively to protect health and to save lives. The exceptions have been some governments that shrugged off the painful evidence of mounting deaths with inevitable grievous consciousness. But most governments acted responsibly, imposing strict measures to contain the outbreak. Yet some groups protested, refusing to keep their distance, marching against travel restrictions, as if measures that governments must impose for the good of their people constitute some kind of political assault on autonomy or personal freedom. Guys, there's like an exclamation point with personal freedom, as if it's like sarcastic. I'm like, why would you write it this way? It's just kind of mocking. Looking to the common good is much more than the sum of what is good for individuals. It means having a regard for all citizens and seeking to respond effectively to those needs of the least fortunate. It is all too easy for some to take an idea, in this case, for example, personal freedom, and turn it into an ideology, creating a prism through which they judge everything. I live in America, but personal freedom is like everything. Like, and we have to protect the liberties of the individual, and we get to decide how we want. Like, government exists and can operate because it has the consent of the government governed, but it does need that consent. And when you start destroying personal liberty, personal freedom, and making compromises on that, that's when you can have serious issues for how big the government can get, for tyrants who can come in and take over. And like, I know the Pope has said some crazy things that people don't like, and most Catholics that I know are kind of shrug off the Pope, I guess. And I saw that was a consensus, like on Twitter. The only people I saw kind of praising the Pope were the people who are leftists anyway, and a lot of them not even really religious from what I could see, or past people who confess they were religious in the past. But again, these decisions and about the lockdowns and stuff, political party lines and stuff. But I'm not giving up individual personal freedom. But the question is, who decides what is the common good? Who decides what that is? I mean, as the Pope, I suppose you would assume that moral authority that you would appeal to would be God. And when the lockdown started, there was a lot of Catholics that I saw that were like, we can't do the Eucharist. What are we supposed to do? And I mean, my opinion about the communion is different than theirs. I mean, we do it, but it's not like to the same degree. So there was a lot of them who were just like really upset, like, we can't come together and do this. So it's just strange to me that the Pope would, because if you're going to talk about what the moral authority and appeal to what heaven or the Lord or what the Bible says, it is important for the church to come together and to gather. And you can argue about how you feel about healing, other stuff like that. But I've seen people like, quote, what would Jesus do? Not everybody operates obviously like Jesus did, but he obviously like killed lepers and other stuff. And then the Bible talks about call the elders and have them pray and so on. And I'm not saying that everybody should. There's so many different opinions on stuff like that. But if you're going to do a what would Jesus do, I'm just telling you that's what he did. And as far as this common good thing, who decides that politicians in power? What if it's the opposing party that you don't like? What if it's a tyrant? So what if, democracy is wolves deciding, which sheep to eat? That's not quite the quote, but but you get my drift. So who decides what is for the common good? Because I listen to sometimes when the Pope's in the news, it's usually not for something that I think that I agree with at all. So kind of mocking, not kind of like mocking individual freedom and um our how we cling to it, how we fight for it, and saying that we should basically lay down it all for the sake of the pandemic. Like, people were willing to play ball at first, but like I said, when the restrictions got really silly or inconsistent, like I think the day we were talking about lockdowns or how we couldn't do something, we couldn't go to a restaurant, but then my sisters went out and got a massage that day. And like some of the other things that people could do in New York, you could get acupuncture, you could go buy a bike, you could go to the liquor store. And so there's other things that, I mean, what I don't want to get into what is and what isn't essential, because if you're depending on your work for income to take care of your family, your job is definitely essential to you. So I don't want to pick winners and losers or anything like that myself, but to say that people can go get a massage or acupuncture, but if you have $1,000 seated church, but you can only have 10 or 25 people in there, that's ridiculous. So you can see why they pushed this lawsuit and why people decided to rule the way that they did. And I'm really glad that we won out on this one, but like I said, 5-4, that is a seriously slim margin. And yeah, thank you all for commenting and watching. Yeah, so yeah, I definitely don't, the how it's written, the tone of it, the exclamation point here with personal freedom, as if like it, I don't know, it's some kind of joke or some kind of game, where that's why we fought, for the right of America. And I think we live in the greatest country in the world. And some of you watching aren't from America. We have a difference of opinion, perhaps, but I believe our liberties, especially our First Amendment rights, are what is what makes us so great. And so the people on the other side of the aisle, on the left, uh, try to come against it quite frequently, and that's one reason why the courts are so important, judges are so important, justices are so important, why it was such an important issue to people during the election. Like Obama tried to say Hispanics didn't voted for Trump because they're against gay marriage and they're against abortion. And if you look in the top 10 issues, I don't know, abortion might have been like 12, but gay marriage isn't even in there at all. And it's not and I went to like evangelical events and stuff. That wasn't like, I don't even remember that being like a topic of conversation. Like, but people talk about the Supreme Court and the religious liberty. And it's funny that Obama didn't admit like socialism or something. Like, obviously that's like the elephant in the room, and why so many Cubans and et cetera, like especially in Florida, decided to sway towards Trump. But they just believe what they want to believe, because I don't know, it was just kind of easy for him to, I don't know, it always seemed like he always had to knock Christians a bit. I never liked Obama. But I'm gonna call it a day. I gotta, my niece's birthday party is tonight, and I gotta head out there. But really quickly, I want to say please go to blacktnews.com and follow. Make sure you Some of you may know or may not know that I am also besides like writing articles and doing political commentary and stuff, I do write books for different genres. And my website and thank you guys for sitting around and chatting. Like I said, I'm very glad that Amy Coney Barrett made played a pivotal role with this decision. But I know that we're not always going to like all the decisions that they made, but we can take the win today. And in closing, I just want to say it's really good that we had a president who was willing to fight for what he believed was right. And there aren't a lot of people who have the guts that he has on the Republican side. There's a lot of Democrats who would do anything, which we saw the Kavanaugh hearing, and they believe that, the ends more than justifies the means, and they'll, just do awful, awful, awful things. And the president, he stands up to fight. And that's why at the end of the day, I believe people really hated him. And because a lot of Republicans are comfortable being the opposition party, putting out emails saying, please donate, and so on. And doing the tough things to lead. A lot of them don't actually have the stomach, especially for like the opposition. Like, I don't understand someone like Mitt Romney. Like, when Mitt Romney was running and I held up a sign with some of my sisters that said Obama's not working, people were like, you guys are the wrong color. They're going to put you back in chains. People were legit saying this, but who spread that rumor? Oh, that's just something that Democrats believe and say anyway. But Joe Biden said that he's gonna put y'all back in chains, and that's not a joke. People like legit believe that, and we're legit saying that to Black people. If you vote Republican, they'll put you back in chains. People were legit saying that, and they said other awful things about Mitt Romney. And he's just kind of toes the line and is the one who has to, And I can understand him having beef with Trump, and I definitely understand the McCain's having beef with Trump, like Cindy McCain and so on. But at the end of the day, it's like, these people are not your friends. And can't you at least, you're talking about doing what's right for America by opposing Trump. Why don't you do what's right? Why don't you get over your whole battle and your ego and do what's actually right for America? And in the case of like these justices and this decision that came down with ruling on the side of religious liberty, because they were just saying it doesn't make sense that you can have all these other shops open up at 50% capacity and a church can only have a cap of like 10. And there's people who are against it. We need to know, if we had an honest media, they'd be knocking down Joe Biden's door to see how he felt about this decision. We need to know how the people in Georgia felt about this decision and what kind of judges that they would vote for. And that's what the media needs to press on this issue. That's what they need to press. I know how Biden felt about Heller. He didn't like that decision. And I know how other people felt about Hobby Lobby. They didn't like that decision. I know how they feel about religious liberty or gun rights and so on. And so just get more, evidence out there. And the last thing before I go, the court did Cuomo did change his orders like a week out, and the Solicitor General put it out there, I guess maybe trying to end the lawsuit, and was saying, oh, well, these churches now we changed like the rules so they actually can have more people. And then their lawyers were like, you might change your mind. We're not going to like withdraw our lawsuit now that you've like changed the rules conveniently. We're going to keep pushing this because and why would you trust them? Why would you trust them? So I thank these people for fighting, and I'm grateful for the president. I'm grateful to the Republicans that voted Amy, and we got to win this time. And hopefully the Democrats do not try to and cannot have the capability of packing the courts. But thank you guys again. Please visit blacktnews.com. And this is Christina signing out.